can't really see it very well, about people who make our clothes in a slum in Dhaka, Bangladesh. And I just want to give you a sense of how they live and what it looks like. This is if you can imagine, have you been to Bangladesh? Have you been to Dhaka? It has some big sort of river valleys that fill up in the monsoon, and so this slum and many others are actually built on stilts over the edge of the river. So when the river floods, often the houses just fall down because the stilts get knocked over. But so what you're looking at is positioned about 40 to 50 feet up above the ground on stilts. So that's their kitchen for 200 people. It's one gas burner, and they have to take turns in using the gas burner to cook. Of course, it's very hot. Most of them have it's generally very small rooms they get to live in, often 3 or 4 people in a room. And it's quite dangerous, as you can see. I mean, if you're not careful, you can easily slip down and you fall quite a way. So basically the lavatory is just a hole in the floor that goes down into the valley, which is kind of a good reason for not falling into it. The shower's a hose pipe for about 260 people. But the real point is, remember what I said at the beginning about the income. Typically the women who work here, who work in the garment industry, get paid. How do we know that? Because they have the labels. They sometimes smuggle out the labels of the garments they're making to show the garment workers' union who's trying to represent them to get them a decent salary. So, I mean, you'll be familiar with these kind of stories, I'm sure. You see them in the press from time to time. I mean, what is... The reason I'm showing this rather grainy film to you is that I was there. So I was with the woman who was taking this film in the slum a year ago. And the conversations we had with this woman, among others, were very striking. I mean, she had come from her village about 100 kilometres from Dakar to work in a garment factory, making clothes for Primark, because she hoped it would be a better life for her. And what was really striking is she got completely trapped in a cycle of poverty. The guy who owned the factory in which she worked also owned the slum in which she lived, and essentially charged her wages in rent. So she didn't eat. She said she would have gone home to her family if she could afford the bus fare, and she couldn't afford the bus fare from her income. And remember, these people are working often in conditions where there's no properly organised minimum wage, there are no labour rights, there are no unions. They're often working in free trade zones set up by the Bangladeshi government for Western clothes makers to be able to make clothes essentially unregulated. So this is a conspiracy, or it's an agreement between the government and the West. And if you've ever wondered how can you possibly go to Primark and buy 3 t-shirts for £3, well that's why, because somebody at the other end of that transaction is getting paid, 50p a day for making it. So really and just to give you a contrast, to give you the upstory, obviously that's a depressing and very sad vision. To give you the upside, just on the end of this story before we carry on, whilst I was also over there in Bangladesh, I went to see a fair trade project. This was where I was up in the northern part of Bangladesh, finding my mobile phone was working so well. A project called the Swallows Project, and this is a fair trade cooperative of women workers weaving, dyeing, designing their own clothes that come to Britain under a label called People Tree. Some of you may have come across. It's a fair trade clothing label in Britain. And they get paid on average 4 times the salary of the women in the slum for doing similar work, and they live in a community in their village. They don't have to come to a factory in the city, where they're also provided with a creche for their children, a primary school for their children, legal advice if their husband's beating them up, medical centre, a whole holistic community. It's only women who work, because of course women are always the poorest in poor communities, and it's clearly transformed their lives and their families' lives. So the point is, there's another model, okay, and it doesn't have to be this way. It's really one of the critical points of fair trade, but we have to want it to change. Okay, so what's this all about? Oh, not